Hi and welcome to Total Recall. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics.
And I'm Matt Zeoli.
And you can support my Patreon on patreon.com. Just search Tom Scioli when you're on there, SCIOLI.
You follow me on Instagram at cinema_tomb.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Total Recall Show or on Instagram at Total_Recall_show. So, since we started our show, pop culture's been on hold.
Yeah.
Movies haven't been coming out, theatrical releases, they've been trying to figure out what to do with them. So some have made it to like Disney Plus or HBO Max or whatever. So it was kind of a drought.
Yeah.
For new things to talk about, because we want to do a mix of old and new, but we've been leaning kind of heavily into the older stuff just because the new stuff hasn't been coming out. So we're tackling something that's relatively fresh today. We're talking about Tenet.
One of the most recent is Tenet the last blockbuster?
Could be. It's the last movie I saw in the theater was
yeah.
Tenet. And when I saw it, there were two people in the theater. There was me and somebody else, and
yeah.
I was in the front row, and this person who I don't know was in the back row. So
yeah.
that kind of tells you where we're at. Yeah, it was Christopher Nolan gauging reaction.
They went ahead and they had released that in the theater, Warner Brothers, and then in the time frame after its release, HBO Max from Warner Brothers announced their pivoting. There's a huge Tenet's release, and the HBO Max announcement was kind of like
it was
really,
testing the waters.
Really shaking up.
Yeah, and I know Christopher Nolan is somebody who is very vocal about the fact that he does not like this development of
ripped it
of digital first or streaming first. He wants the theatrical, the theatrical release and the theatrical experience of his work.
He said HBO. I think his quote was HBO Max is the worst streaming site. So the big announcement was that Warner Brothers was taking their slate of upcoming films,
theatrical releases. Yeah,
straight up releasing them right to their streaming service.
Yeah,
and these were movies planned for the theater and everything.
Mm-hmm.
People are saying Warner Brothers studio as a whole is trying to pivot to turning a normal film studio to streaming.
It's the year 2021. Every movie I've ever seen, the year 2021 is very different from the world as we know it. So sci-fi kind of stuff is happening.
The Road Warrior takes place in 2021.
We love the 80s, and we cover a lot of stuff from the 80s.
We do.
And you think about it when it was the 80s, think about the 1940s. And now in the 2020s, when we think about the 80s, it's the same amount of time. The amount of time between now and the 80s is the same as the time between the 80s and the 40s. So think about how weird and exotic the 40s seem to you in the 80s. That's what the 80s is now. So it is, of course, the world that we live in is completely different from the world we were born into.
Yeah.
Why should we expect any different?
Wonder Woman 1984 is the first test.
Yeah, I'd like to figure out a way. I would like to see that in the theater, and hopefully I'll get figure out a way to see that in a safe way or whatever, because I would like to see that in the theater. I've been hearing it's been getting an underwhelming reaction, and I do wonder if it's look, you're watching a summer blockbuster or whatever on your TV or on your iPad or whatever, or on your phone.
I watch it on my Tamagotchi.
Yeah, I watched it on my Nintendo Game & Watch Super Mario Brothers.
I pull out a little Tamagotchi after I feed the creature. I'm then Wonder Woman 1984 pops up.
So Tenet, it's it's the newest movie we've talked about on this show. I loved it.
Awesome.
I went into it cold. And that's how I like to go into movies. I don't want to know anything about it. I know I love Christopher Nolan. I know I loved the Batman, his Batman series and Inception and Memento and Dunkirk and all. So I'm like I'm on board. So like
Oh, yeah.
I had to see this. It's like sight unseen. I'm going to see this.
You had said great things about it. My buddy Dan had watched it. Said great things. I was stoked for it, and it delivered. I loved it. I thought it was awesome.
Watching it, like I was watching it and like trying to figure out like what am I watching, and like
I
riveted,
couldn't
but yeah, like kind of trying to figure it out. And you do like start to get more of a sense as you're watching it, like what it is, and then you're riding, then you're on board and you're right, and watching it, I was kind of like, oh, this is like 21st century James Bond. It's like he just made this James Bond movie that just like upped the ante in a huge way. And like I love the Daniel Craig James Bond movies. And they do like from the very first one they felt like, okay, we're in like uncharted territory with James Bond. Like they have taken James Bond and like upped the stakes and turned it up to 11 and just like given us like the ultimate James Bond. Like the Daniel Craig James Bond is my favorite James Bond. But then like when I was watching this, I was like, wow, that sort of cutting edge Daniel Craig James Bond seems passé now.
I know.
Like, you know?
From the Daniel Craig ones that you had mentioned, like, you got Sam Mendes, like Mark Forster.
Yeah.
But it seems like every time one of those Bonds came out, Christopher Nolan's name was always in the mix about possibly directing the next one. And every time, another one comes out, Christopher Nolan, and then he just never did one. And he's just like, fuck it, I'm going to make my own.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about Star Wars, we've been talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it is like, that is a clearly demonstrated path. George Lucas wanted to make Flash Gordon, couldn't get the rights, so he made Star Wars and like made himself a zillionaire. And then it's like he wanted to do James Bond with Steven Spielberg. They couldn't get the rights to James Bond, so they made Indiana Jones and made themselves like another $1 zillion. So it's like this. I think Chris Nolan wanted to make a James Bond, wasn't able to, and he's like, well, I'm just going to take all my James Bond ideas and I'm going to make my own thing.
This could be a series. Like,
yes.
I would kill for
I'm just going to put this out there, and maybe I'll delete this because maybe it won't end up being true. But I'm assuming like there's going to be a lot of spoilers in this episode. So watch, put this on pause. Keep it in your queue or whatever. Watch Tenet and then come back and watch this because like I want to talk about like the meat of this movie. Yeah, but like I went into it cold. And I recommend other people go into it cold because I was just dazzled. I loved the sense of discovery and the sort of puzzle that the movie was. I know like Nolan makes these puzzle movies and I'm all about that.
It's like James Bond with a cool gimmick in like an awesome like device. Like device. Such neat.
Yeah, it's
device.
like what would be a really cool MacGuffin for a James Bond? And he came up with this MacGuffin for a James Bond movie that's so cool. Like I don't know the names of any of the characters.
Me neither. I couldn't tell you.
It's like there's Kenneth Branagh, but like there's like the James Bond character.
Yeah.
And then he meets like the Felix Leiter character who's like I'm here to help you. There's like a Q character who like explains the gimmick to that like
inversion.
Okay, yeah, inversion. That there's this like radiation. It's all this like Einsteinian physics kind of stuff. There's this like radiation that you can like expose objects to, and they get reversed in time, so they work backwards. So like bullets will fly backwards into this gun as opposed to coming out of them. And
you go through a thing called a turnstile.
Yeah.
To send you to invert your objects, and then. Fire is reversed, so it's fire becomes ice.
Yeah, fire makes you really cold.
Yeah.
It like pulls heat out of you. Yeah. It's and it's all well thought through, and it's kind of like dreamlike. And there's a logic, and then they make the logic very like visual, so that once you reach the halfway point of this movie, like you kind of get it. It like kind of all clicks into place, and it's like when they're going into like reverse time, it's like. They go through the door and it's like a red. There's a red.
Yeah, red and blue.
And blue. Yeah, they do red and blue. And that. So like what you're realizing is all these like little tactical operations, these little missions you've been watching through this movie. Half the agents, like there's sort of two teams, the good guys and the bad guys, and each of the two teams are split up into two teams. So there's like the guys who are going into it backwards through time. There's the guys going in through forwards, and they're kind of sending each other information back and forth. You're a time traveler at war with other time travelers, and you know, some people are at the end of their journey, and you're just meeting them now at the beginning of your journey. Like the sort of James Bond character, he's at the beginning of his journey. He's just meeting all these people for the first time from his perspective, but. Like the Felix Leiter, this is the end of his journey. Like he's meeting him after they've already been friends for years, and like James Bond just doesn't know it, that they've been friends for years, but Felix Leiter knows, and he has to like be careful what he tells him and doesn't tell him because it's like all that.
He says we get up to some stuff. He's like, do I know? He's like, we get up to some stuff,
which we'll see in subsequent
future
episodes. Yeah,
I don't think I could do inversion if I went through that turnstile. Like just seeing like the world backwards, I was like getting kind of. Yep. I was like, I think I'm gonna be sick.
It is kind of cool, like, and the car chases and stuff. Where, I mean, it's just like, you know, like a movie like this, you got to like sit down with like all kinds of like note cards, and maybe he's got like a couple like little things going, and like just to figure out all the little bits and like just put all the pieces in place and like okay, because like everything kind of pays off. So it's like you see a car kind of like explode in reverse, or like get into a reverse accident where it's like on the side of the road and they go and then it's like back driving, and then you see like how it got to be that like.
I think Christopher Nolan said it took him like 5 years to write the screenplay for this.
Sure, you got to do a lot of heavy lifting. You got to it's like you got to figure out like okay, what's this? You know, you got to kind of like write the movie twice. Like I mean, like go through the whole writing process of making a movie, but then do that twice because you know you got to like make it work backwards as well as forwards.
You know, Nolan always delivers like my just some like my favorite things. He's like shooting on film. Practical effects,
yeah,
and shooting on location, and the locations like for Christopher Nolan movies, he always finds like the coolest vehicles, and like I'm like this thing was like the ships are like huge and weird, the planes are huge and weird. It's like these things are all around on Earth, and he's like I gotta find them and photograph them. It's like it's so awesome. Like it just has like the movies look and feel gigantic.
And like the stakes feel really high, and it feels like terrible danger, like constant. And Kenneth Branagh seems like just this like unstoppable opponent or villain or what like he's holding all the cards. The fact that we don't know anybody's name in this is by design. In regular life, I have a hard time remembering people's names in general.
Yeah, my brain is mushy.
So like, and it happens to me with movies too. Like I'm not one of those guys who can be like, oh, there's that guy. So I'm like, and so it's kind of like a surprise now that we're talking. It's like, oh no, the reason you don't remember anybody's names is because nobody has a name.
There's like somebody called the Passenger, well-dressed man,
so
sharp-dressed man. It's like the ZZ Top guys.
And so, but the star like James Bond is played by David Washington,
who is Denzel's son.
Okay, that's news to me. Like I didn't know he was Denzel's son. That's like super interesting. Like I love like Hollywood royalty and acting families and stuff.
Yeah. So he was. I first saw him as the lead in Black Klansman, Spike Lee's Black Klansman. Yeah. And when I watched him in that, I didn't know he was Denzel's son at that. But then after like I saw it, I was like, oh. We got another Washington family member, I had forgotten he was like a running back. He like played for like he was on the practice squad for the Rams and played in the UFL or something like that. Great performance, super talented.
Yeah.
But when you're Denzel's son, I guess you could just pivot right into like starring in Tenet.
right, yeah. Right, you pay your dues by being the lead in a Spike Lee movie. Yeah, and that's paying your dues. And then your next movie is I'm the new James Bond, basically. Yeah, he's Indiana Jones, basically, because it's like awesome. One of the top directors in the world has created his own version of James Bond, and it's me.
Yeah, it's like he has a great look. He's awesome. There's jokes. Like low-key jokes in this movie,
and he has like Sean Connery delivery. Like he does like this deadpan that's like really good. Cutting and yeah, like you said, like is really funny when humor is called for.
And then Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, he's great in this.
Great in this.
And like Felix Leiter was always kind of like a fun character. Like anytime he'd show up in a James Bond movie, it would always be kind of fun. And then occasionally, like, you know, the role would be played by different people. You know, Jack Lord repeated the role a couple times, but then like different act, and it's always be a treat. Like, oh, here's Felix. Yeah, here's Felix
Baker.
Leiter. Yeah, so like. Robert Pattinson playing the Felix Leiter role is like, you know, like, oh, cool, you know.
They keep saying the like the code. There's like, it's a Twilight world and there's no friends at desk. Do you think that they were like, he's like, hey Robert, it's a Twilight world. You were in that. I'm gonna go to my trailer.
Yeah, I get it.
I get it.
If I saw this movie with a crowd of more than 2. Maybe, you know, when they say that, like, there might have been like a little murmur, a little pop. You watch it and you're like, holy shit, I'm watching a James Bond movie, and I'm watching the greatest James Bond movie ever. And then it becomes like what it is. Like, it becomes this crazy time travel movie, and it's like, holy shit, like you know, like, you're like, wow, I'm really watching a cool movie now. And if it just stayed in James Bond mode, it was just like, okay, here's 21st century, here's you know, the James Bond for the 2020s.
Yeah,
like,
I'm on board.
Yeah, it's awesome. But the fact that it like ramps up,
the locations too. He finds these awesome, like a James Bond movie. It's
like a James Bond,
beautiful. Yeah. It's like, where are they at next? It's like, I love when he's hanging out inside that wind turbine, like out on the ocean. I'm like, you find just like, it's just the movie's like a mammoth.
I've only seen the movie once. But like a lot of Christopher Nolan movies, like, it feels like a movie where, like, the second time I see it is going to be a blast. Like, because there are like early things that happen early in the movie where you're not quite sure what you're entertained and you're engrossed, but you're not quite sure what you're seeing. Where, like, I feel like next time I watch it, I'm gonna be like, oh, well, there's that and there's that. The Prestige.
I love
the first time I saw The Prestige. Like, I fucked up. I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it. I saw it on DVD, and I'm kicking myself for it. But like, I watched it, was blown away, and then immediately watched it again. And like, that's like, I feel like this will be the same. Like just watch it again, and it's like, oh, and you start to see like how all the pieces go together.
I love The Prestige. It's one of my favorite Christopher Nolan movies.
Oh, me too. It knocked me on my ass. It was,
it's
like,
so
really
good.
Yeah.
And I just...
it changed the way I... spoilers for The Prestige, if you haven't seen it. Pause this. Go watch The Prestige. Highly recommended. Love it. But, like, Prestige changed the way I watch Star Trek now. Because it's like, what you learn in The Prestige is that for teleportation to work, a necessary step is that you get disintegrated. So, like, every time Captain Kirk goes down to the planet, Captain Kirk is being disintegrated by the machine, but the machine, as it's disintegrating him, keeps a record of every one of his molecules, and then creates a duplicate of him on the surface, puts those molecules together, but it's not the same guy. It's a duplicate. It thinks it's Captain Kirk, but actually Captain Kirk just died a horrible death and got vaporized, and now there's this new guy who has all of Captain Kirk's memories. Like, The Prestige spells that out.
I'm like, and that's so fucked up.
Yeah, it's like, thank you for ruining stuff. So, like, you're just watching Captain Kirk getting, like, murdered again and again by this machine, and a clone gets to, like, live out his life. There is, like, a Star Trek The Next Generation episode where they kind of address that a little. It's like early in Star Trek The Next Generation, so they kind of, like, brush it under the rug. They're like, okay, we haven't quite figured. But there's an episode where, like, Riker goes down to the surface, and then the teleportation transmission gets kind of, like, messed up, so, like, the signal gets sent to another place at the same time. So now there's, like, 2 Rikers going through the universe, and then by the end of the episode, he's like, okay, well, see you next time, and then that Riker goes off on adventures, and we never hear from him ever again. But so, like, they do address that idea that, like, okay, it is a computer kind of like recreating you based on the information it read as it was tearing you to pieces.
God. He like cracks that Riker on the head with like a mallet
yeah.
and throws him down the hill.
When he meets up with Michael Caine, it's like, oh, it's fun to see Mike. And then Michael Caine gives him like this like super credit card or whatever.
Oh
like,
yeah, he's like, I don't think if you're impersonating a Brooks Brothers suit won't cut it.
Yeah.
It was a dime ruby the size of a grapefruit. He's a Christopher Nolan player. He seems to cast him in a lot of his movies.
Yeah, I mean, he's Alfred in the Batman movies. And in The Prestige, he's like the guy who, teaches you how to do the Prestige,
The Prestige.
The Prestige. Right? You got to kill the bird.
And this step is called Crack the Clone.
That's also like an ingredient of like James Bond, where it's like you're in this world of like insane wealth.
Oh, yeah.
Like think of like the richest person and then it's nothing compared to what, and like that you go into that world, and Michael Caine's kind of like the guy who's the border guardian or whatever, the supernatural aide, who kind of like says, okay, here's your credit card.
Here's your credit card. He's like, can you box it up? And the waiter's like, absolutely not.
I was at a wedding that was kind of fancy, and I was like, the stuff was good, but I'm like, could you like wrap this up? And they're like, well, you're gonna have to sign this form. It's like they make sure to like humiliate you if you have to like keep the rest of your food to go.
They're like, hey everybody, this guy wants a doggy bag.
Get a load of this guy.
The spotlight goes.
They make you sign the form with like this huge like quill, so you're really drawing attention.
All right, well,
as the best man's giving his speech. You saw it more recently than I did. Like, you got any fresh perspectives? Or?
Just like the movie was refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as in like it just looked beautiful. I felt like it was like it quenched my like thirst for like a new big blockbuster.
Mm-hmm.
Delivered
it was something different.
Yeah.
Like again, like we keep comparing it to James Bond, but it was like it was something different. Like it's like he took the James Bond setup and then created this like whole other thing out of it.
He was saying I think it was Spy Who Loved Me was his like vibe for this.
Okay, so he has, because again, I haven't done like any reading about Tenet, but he has acknowledged that like, this is my James Bond.
Yeah,
he has acknowledged that. Okay.
Yeah. Every time like a Craig Bond came out, they're like, Christopher Nolan could be directing the next James Bond. It's like
I don't know what that's about. Like if they like kind of dangle it in front. Like I've heard that thing of like if you kind of make it known that you really want this job, like it kind of gives
wills
them something
it into being.
Or no, but that it kind of gives them something to hold over you, like that kind of like Hollywood is kind of like a lot of like sort of petty kind of like a lot of like power moves and stuff.
I'm gonna take lunch with Chris Nolan today.
and I'm gonna tell him that he can't have James Bond. Wish me luck. It's gonna be fun. Do you want me to film it? To film his reaction when I tell him he can't do James Bond? Man, I get like a real charge out of like doing something with like the Fantastic Four or something. But it is like, there's just so much to be gained creatively and financially to just being like, okay, instead of doing Fantastic Four, let me do my own Fantastic Four, or instead of doing Superman, or let me do my own Superman or whatever. Like it just. But again, it like there is that allure to like, oh, I'm working on like the real thing. But yeah, like, so we got Tenet, we got Star Wars, we got Indiana Jones. These are all the results of somebody really, really wanting to work on like a property that they loved as a child and being sort of forced to like do their own, Kmart version of it, and then they strike gold.
It's awesome, and I bet it looked pretty awesome on the big screen.
It was amazing, yeah. Like and again, it's one of those movies with a lot of details, a lot of like little bits and pieces, and like you were, I don't know if you said it on camera or not, but you were saying it's kind of like Halo or whatever.
Oh, the third act, like I don't know if it was a set build, or I'm sure it was a set, but they find these locations. I'm like, it looks amazing. It's like looks like they're fighting at like a map from the game Halo. I was like,
yeah, and there's a lot of like little bits of like you're looking at all these like the little players that
they're
going
running
through their
around,
thing, and there's red team and blue team.
It just is so neat, and I'm glad it got a release. I read that it didn't. It was a very big budget on the movie.
Sure.
I don't think it cleared it.
No, I mean that's just where we're at right now.
I hope that doesn't stop. them from doing more.
Who knows? Yeah, I mean, it will make its money back eventually. Like a lot of these things, like there's a lot of movies that kind of bombed in theaters and then made their money, and it's obviously going to make it. It's just going to take longer.
I bought it to support.
Kind of like the first time you see like a reverse explosion or something, and then like there's
so
parts
neat.
where like there's like these reverse explosions where like the building comes back together, and if you're standing in like the crater or like the corner of the building that's not there, and then you realize, oh wait, and then the reverse explosion happens, and now you're embedded in stone.
It's insane, and as you're creeping through time, your wound starts to appear.
Yeah.
Like as he was getting close to that, I like how it's like
start seeing like a bruise,
or his shirt ripped, and then as it gets further along, blood's falling out. It's like so you're like going towards your wound. It's so weird.
Yeah, just the whole sort of like time travel puzzle, and it's such a fun puzzle. And these movies that do it well, like Back to the Future, like there's these movies that do it really well, and novels, like The Time Traveler's Wife and stuff, where they kind of figure out ways to make this stuff pay off. It's always fun.
It's so awesome. And
the Terminator series, I mean, it's obvious, but like Tenet, it's the same forwards as backwards.
Oh yeah, it's like
it's a palindrome. The movie is a palindrome, and the title is a palindrome, and all the actors' names are palindrome.
For a second, I thought it was the Super starring Joe Pesci.
The Tenet.
John D. Washington, great. Can't wait to see him in some more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, John David Washington, like in this, I think he was doing some straight up like Denzel line reads and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way Denzel, like a musician has their their lick style, their licks. All of our great actors have their like trick bag of of line delivery moves. Like,
well, I'd imagine like, talk about like influences and like how hard it is to shed certain influences. Like it's probably hard to like figure out like your dad's influence. Like if your dad is like this great actor, it's like of course you're going to be influenced. Like you're kind of influenced by your dad to begin with. So like you come into acting, you're going to have, and it is like, what do you do with that influence? Like how do you shed it? How do you like make it your own? How do
you lean in?
Do you lean in? Yeah, it's interesting. It'll be an interesting journey to watch.
The set piece, at the beginning of the film, it's like this theater with like this like with a ton of people, and it's like super bright lights, which it feels
it's hard to light an area like that. Yeah, watching it now, this is like my first time seeing this, and this scene is one that I wanted to see again. To see like, oh, does it make sense, or does it play out differently? And of course it does. Popping a bullet out of himself or whatever, so it's like, knowing what all this stuff does play out very differently.
Oh,
and all the different badges, like, okay, which badge are we going with? Again, it's like, like the Mission Impossible movie series, it's kind of like, oh yeah, this is, Tom Cruise doing his James Bond. And so like, we have all these different, variations on a theme that we've seen, sort of accumulate over time. And this is, like the master thesis, of all. And it's like, okay, they're wearing those masks, and the first time you see this, it's like, okay, they're just wearing like gas masks, like anti-riot gear or whatever. But now it's like, oh no, they've got the gas masks because they're getting that like reverse air that they need.
I forgot. Like whenever you're inverted, you can't
breathe regular oxygen. You got to get reverse oxygen. Yeah. And now I guess maybe they're pumping the air with reverse oxygen, and it's going to make all these people pass out. Again, it's just playing out like very differently. The second time. Was that Guy Pearce?
He looks like Guy Pearce.
Yeah, this guy in here looks like Guy Pearce. I mean, he is one of the Nolan players.
Oh, from Memento, we love Memento. This is.
Yeah, you're just gonna watch us like watching the movie for the second time. It's cool. When he's like fighting that guy who's kind of like Snake Eyes. He's like they're at the airport, and he's fighting this guy who's like all completely covered up, and you don't know who. And then Robert Pattinson's like, "Don't kill that guy. Whatever you don't kill him." And it's like, that's me. You find out that was him in the future. He's fighting himself. You know, there's all this super cool stuff.
And then like Robert, he sees the character that has like the special keychain like on his backpack, and then it's like, that's Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, like he sees, you know, his friend dead, you know, before he dies. Yeah, just so much work. Like I just get kind of tired thinking about that kind of work to like figure
those
out
are
all
like
these
also you know, real people in the audience. Like the extra budget is like
minimal CGI and
around here is we first see the reverse bullet.
Yeah, so like the first time you're watching this movie, you're just like, okay, I'm watching some chaotic fight and a scene. If I start like thinking about the little ins and outs of it,
like, my head's
Tenet spelled backwards is Tenet. It's like our version of like At the Movies or sneak previews or whatever, and it's like our set is, instead of being like sort of like a fake movie theater that we're sitting in, it is just a couch, because that's like how you're watching movies now. So there's, you know, don't forget to save us a corner of the couch, the aisle seats of your living room.
I'm dollar store Richard Roper.
You've been watching the Tenet episode of Total Recall. I'm Tom Scioli, author of Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
And you can support my Patreon on patreon.com. Just search Tom Scioli, Scioli.
You can follow me on Instagram at cinema_tune.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli, or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli. And you can follow the Total Recall Show on Twitter at Total Recall Show, or on Instagram at Total_Recall_Show. We'll see you at the movies, at home, on your couch.
On your couch. I think Total Recall Show backwards and forwards.
Wow. Total Recall Show backwards is LOHS, LATOT. So we should call the show Total Recall Show LOHS, LATOT, and then that's a palindrome.
Yeah, like we're on the poster for it. Like it's like the Tenet poster, but like
where you're upside down and right side up. He uses color in an interesting way in this. Like in all his movies, he uses color, but like red is like when the movie starts, like the studio logo is in red, and then as the movie kind of plays out, you see that like, you know, like red is, it's like a cue. It's you know, it's like the Jaws theme or whatever, where it's like, here's this like little subconscious reminder of like what's going on right at this moment.
Another great Nolan flick, Insomnia.
Yes,
I love Insomnia. This guy was Al Pacino's partner, like the guy recruiting the protagonist was his partner from Insomnia. So another Nolan player at work.
This movie also has that thing of like he doesn't really even know like what agency he's really working for. Like, and for all he knows, he could be working for like the bad guys, or like he could be like working for like the very opposite of what he thinks he's working for. You know, it's all this like spy stuff.
Mysterious.
Where, like Tenet. Here's your secret password, Tenet.
I'm like, Total Recall.